Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 265. We're talking fantasy players who make a big leap in 2020. Joined once again by Kenny Ortiz at FantasyJabber, the vice president. Kenny, how are you?
Bro, I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm ready to make a leap in 2020. I'm ready. I'm ready to jump up from whatever level I'm at, from being vice president to president. That's what I'm ready for. Move over Trump. Move over Biden, Bernie, Bloomberg. You need Kenny. You need Pres Kenny. That's what you need.
Let's vote in Kenny. That'd be great. Just make sure you get out of Minnesota because I feel like you need to make a big leap out of Minnesota because of how bad the weather is. All right, let's just dive into it. Unless you had anything else to talk about, but we have lists that we came up with about the top 5 fantasy players who can make a big jump in 2020, and this is kind of preparing for our sleepers for the summer drafts. And I'm sure this list will change with free agency and the draft. The teams will make upgrades, and these players, their situations might change. But for now, I think at least I know my list, and I think you have a disagreement with someone on my list. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. But I have a list prepared. I'm pretty confident about this list, and these are players I will target. If drafts were today, which they're not. But let's get into it. So, well, first of all, do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I do have a couple honorable mentions. I tried to get some quarterbacks and tight ends on my top 5, and I couldn't squeeze any on. So I got some in honorable mention. To me, the one quarterback that I would put is Kyler Murray. And he's a unique player. I don't feel like I have a good comp for Kyler Murray. I don't know what kind of player he's going to be. He's got the physical tools. He's fun to watch. I think he has a chance to be really good long term, but I'm not sure what the offense is going to be like. I think he's got some mechanics he still has to work through. And it's kind of hard to determine, is he going to jump? Like, he was like the number 10 or 11 QB in most formats, like at the end of the year. Like, do I see him jumping to be a top 3? I don't think so. So I think his jump is still a year away. The 2 tight ends that I've been thinking about, Mike Gesicki and Will Dissly. Will Dissly, I really like as a player. Man, I feel bad for the guy. He can't stay healthy. He's had 3 major leg injuries or knee injuries in the last few years, dating back to college. So it's like, really, this sucks. But I like him as a player. I like him in that system. And then Mike Gesicki, he's got the raw talent, but I think he's also got some issues. I think he's another year away, and the system, I'm not sure what to make of it, but like, he's the kind of guy in 2021, if Tua was on that team going into his second year, like, I think that could be he could be a breakout candidate for tight end that year. So those are kind of my tight end quarterback honorable mentions. What do you think of those guys?
Well, one of them's in my top 5.
Nice. Okay,
So I'll get to that. Actually, he's my number 5 guy, so we'll get to that in a little bit. Kyler Murray, I like Kyler Murray. I think he's going to be better next year. It really depends on what they do with their offensive line, which is just horrible, at some points last year when they had injuries. But yeah, they have the number 8 pick in the draft, so they can draft a left tackle or a right tackle, and then they could spend a second-day pick on a guard. And suddenly their offensive line will look a lot better, and then Kyler Murray will make progress. I think they need a receiver as well. Larry Fitzgerald is on his way out, and I like Christian Kirk a little bit, but they really need a new receiver or one of their younger guys to step up, like Andy Isabella. I have one player in honorable mention. He's also a tight end, Dawson Knox. He is a high upside. He's very athletic. And, he kind of split snaps last year, at least in the beginning of the year. And he saw more snaps as the year progressed. I could see Dawson Knox being a tight end 1 next year. Especially if Josh Allen keeps progressing. I feel like Josh Allen will get better in this upcoming season. So if the offense is better, they're going to have more red zone opportunities, and that could be more in touchdowns for Dawson Knox. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually really like him as a player too. It's sort of like, I'm just not sure what to make of that team. Or going forward. There is actually, I have a Buffalo Bill on my list, but he is not the guy. The other thing to mention about this list is there are several guys that I think will take a step forward just in their overall production for their team, but I don't think that always translates to fantasy numbers, right? Like, the 2 best examples are the DJ Chark and DJ Moore, but like, DJ Chark was like 16th in standard drafts this past year overall, or standard, fantasy points production at the end of the year. And DJ Moore is like 20th overall, like in standard. Like are those guys going to get so much better that they're going to improve their numbers and be in the top 10 next year? I don't think so. But I think they'll take a step forward. Like Calvin Ridley did that. Remember in 2018, he had a great year. 2019, he was actually better, like as a receiver, and he helped his team more, but he actually scored less touchdowns, 3 less touchdowns. So his fantasy stats went down. Although he was actually a better player. So I think there's a lot of guys in that sort of category. Like they're good players. I think they're going to get better. I think Dawson Knox is definitely that kind of guy, but does it translate to stats for your team? I'm not as confident. So those guys are not on my list, although they definitely should be on people's radars, come time this summer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you don't get brownie points for guys helping their team win.
Right.
It's like the Wayne Corbett guy who has always helped the Jets a lot in the '90s, but he was never a good fantasy player. It's kind of also like Hines Ward. Hines Ward had a couple of good fantasy seasons, but mostly he was better on the field than he was in the fantasy box score. So so we're talking about guys who can really make a jump in fantasy production. Before we begin, Andrew Z has his 5. Michael Gallup, N'Keal Harry, Evan Ingram, Emmanuel Mosley, and then Hollywood Brown. What do you think about this 5?
Actually, Hollywood Brown was kind of on my radar, but none of these guys made my list. All of these guys have some question mark that makes me think I don't think they'd make a huge jump fantasy production. But I think Michael Gallup and Evan Ingram could have huge impacts on helping their team. Maybe even N'Keal Harry. Like I think similarly, all these guys could help their teams win a little more. But I'm not sure that they take a huge step forward, statistically speaking.
Yeah, well, I feel like Gallup had a big year last year. So it's going to be hard for him to make a big leap. Ingram, if he stays healthy, for sure. Hollywood Brown is someone who almost made my list, and Harry, I'm concerned that he was able to not separate from coverage. That was problematic. And we'll see what happens with the quarterback situation. I know Jeff Darlington said yesterday, or maybe it was over the weekend, that he considers Tennessee to be the favorite to land Tom Brady.
Wow.
So if it's Andy Dalton throwing to N'Keal Harry, I'm not going to be too high on N'Keal Harry. All right, let's get to our top 5. Who is your number 5 guy?
My number 5 is Mr. Wide Receiver Anthony Miller. I like Anthony Miller. He finished 61st in 2019 in standard leagues, 58th over on ESPN standard scoring format, 58th in PPR. From weeks 8 to 15, he was a wide receiver 1. He was basically top 13 most weeks in the middle of the year. And then he finished the last 2 weeks of the year, week 16 and 17, with like 1 catch each. Not exactly ideal, but he had some targets. He was involved in the offense. It was just kind of fluky. And I think that's actually good because it kind of depresses his value a little bit. But he's faster than people I think realize. He plays faster. He's a smooth route runner. He catches the contested balls. And so I think he's a guy who can be really, really good in the red zone. I think he reminds me of a little bit of a shiftier version of his teammate, Allen Robinson. So I think Anthony Miller could be a really good player. The only question mark is the offense, or more importantly, the quarterback. I mean, who's throwing in the ball in Chicago? Who knows? That's a problem. But if the offense takes a little bit of a step forward, or if they're able to upgrade the quarterback position, I think Anthony Miller has like a legitimate chance to be like a top 25 type of guy. Like a real high end wide receiver 3 in most formats. So I like him a lot.
Yeah, I think I would like him in other circumstances. Like the issue I have with Miller is that the Bears have announced that Mitchell Trubisky is going to be the starter next year already, which seems like a stupid decision to make. Like, why wouldn't you want to incentivize competition for Trubisky? It doesn't really make sense to me. The issue with Trubisky, well, like, first of all, he sucks. Like, so that's
here's the issue. Yeah, you're bad.
Yeah, that's obvious. The less obvious issue is that he scrambles. He tends to scramble sometimes a lot. He did it less so last year, which was, I think, when Miller started to go off is when Trubisky didn't run very much. But I think there was a game against Dallas where Trubisky started scrambling a lot, and then Miller didn't have a good game. So every time Trubisky runs, it's going to be a target taken away, a potential target taken away from Miller. So it really depends on what happens with Trubisky. Like if he runs a lot, if he decides to scramble a lot like he did in 2018, I don't think Miller's going to have as good of a year. But if Trubisky wants to concentrate more on being a passer, then I could definitely see Miller having a big season.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. My number 5 kind of telegraphed this already. It's Mike Gesicki. I think he's going to have a big year, and kind of like, you mentioned like Tua. I think he's going to be a little bit better off without Tua. at least in the short term, because Tua is going to scramble, kind of like Trubisky. So it's going to be like carry. It's going to be targets taken away from Gesicki. In this new offense that the Dolphins are going to have, Gesicki's going to play in the slot. So that I think that's going to be like a big boost to his target count. And he's so much talent. He's very athletic. He has big upside. We saw him make big strides at the end of last year. I like Gesicki a lot. I think he's going to be a tight end one for sure next year. And hopefully I can get him in the double-digit rounds because I don't draft tight ends in the single-digit rounds.
I haven't drafted a tight. Well, yeah, I don't think you typically drafted a tight end before round 10 almost anywhere. And obviously, you and I have been in leagues where it's like we're the last. Like, I remember, was it a couple years ago? I drafted OJ Howard in the 15th round of a 16-round draft, and you were telling me, "Don't do it. Do it in the last round. Do it for the podcast." So Mike Gesicki might end up being one of the guys on my radar for sure. But maybe I'll just want to let you beat me to it, and I'll just go to the last round.
I didn't even draft a tight end in some of my leagues this year, so I definitely had you beat. Maybe that's something we can talk about in a later week, like strategies that aren't very obvious in fantasy football. I think that'd be a good topic. Andrew says Trubisky stares down Allen Robinson when he struggles. That's true, but it's Anthony Miller's target count went up a lot late in the year. So I think Trubisky is starting to look more toward Miller. So I think that might be a good trend. All right, who's your number 4?
My number 4 is let me get my notes out. Sorry. Okay, my number 4 is Darius Geis. On a talent level, I love Darius Geis, man. I think he's got really, really good vision, really good burst. I think he's even like I look at Nick Chubb and they both have very similar games. Like Darius Geis is like, he does everything well. And the thing he's really, really good at is like, he's got that Shady McCoy vision, not quite as good. But he's got some of like that girly power, but not as good. Like he could be a really good player. For 1 month last year, he was really, really good. And I thought he was going to become a star, but in the second half of the year, and then he got injured again. So obviously, big question mark here is the injuries. But I think just on talent alone, if this guy can stay healthy, which I recognize is a big if, I fully expect Darius Geis to take a huge step forward. I think if Darius Geis is healthy for a whole year, I fully expect him to be like a top 15 fantasy running back, maybe even more, maybe a top 10. And he's the kind of guy, if he stays healthy in 2020, he'll be a first or second round fantasy pick in the summer of 2021 because he really has all the talent. The only question is, can he stay healthy?
Any concern with Peterson coming back for sure?
Not this year. I mean, because when they were both in the lineup, Geis was clearly the guy in November last year. And maybe that was a part of the problem. Like maybe they fed him and that, he wasn't ready and he got injured again. Yeah, I don't know what the situation is. So maybe they'll want to take it easy. So I guess I'm not as concerned to Adrian Peterson. I'm just concerned that they'll baby Geis. That would be my concern. But I would imagine that, he picks up steam in the second half of the year. He picks it up. We've seen that with a lot of running backs coming back. And so he's the kind of guy that I think could be a legit league winner in 2020.
I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I didn't think of Geis and have him in my top 5. Like it feels like he should be. I guess the reason I didn't put him there, I feel like in my mind he was already like very productive, but then again he wasn't because he's missed so much time with injuries. And yeah, the injuries are the big question mark. But if people are concerned about Geis's injuries, then he's going to be drafted later than he should be, and then you can get a good value. I think Geis has a negative stigma attached to him right now because he hasn't lasted a full season. But it's such a small sample size, like 2 seasons. Like it could just be fluky injuries. Like maybe he has a big year, and I totally agree. If he lasts the entire year, I think he's definitely a top 15 running back.
Nice.
Okay. My number 4 is Mecole Hardman from the receiver from the Chiefs. Sammy Watkins, I don't think he's going to be back next year. DeMarcus Robinson's a free agent. We saw Mecole Hardman have some big games when other receivers were out. Mm-hmm. And Hardman's going to be a full-time starter, I think, next year for the Chiefs. And, with Patrick Mahomes, as long as Patrick Mahomes can stay healthy, Hardman's going to have a ton of opportunities to hit some big plays downfield. He's going to get more targets. He's very talented. I love Hardman, and I don't think he's on anyone's radar right now. Maybe he will be come July or August. But right now, I'm very interested in Hardman. What do you think?
Should I talk about him now if he's higher on my list?
Yeah, go ahead. What number is he for you?
He's number 2 on my list, and I was thinking about making him number 1. By the way, I read this week. You know his first name is Kerry McCole Hardman. I'm going to call him Kerry Hardman from now on. You're 100% right. He finished 53rd in standard leagues in 2019, 63rd in PPR, ESPN formats. But I went back and was watching a bunch of the season. He missed on 4 long plays, like where they just missed long touchdowns. I know a lot of people are like, well, a lot of receivers miss. Like, not like this. Like, most receivers never like have a flat out miss that could have been a touchdown. The best receivers maybe have 1 or 2. He literally had 4 times over the course of the year where like they were inches away from having a bomb touchdown. If he catches just 2 of those, he goes from being the 53rd best receiver last year to the 38th in fantasy. If he catches all 4 of those, he goes from being 53rd to 24th best. Like, wow. I mean, literally you're 4 passes away. I trust Patrick Mahomes to hit those more often than not. Mecole Hardman is so good. He's so quick, so fast. And as you said it, Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson are going to be gone. By the way, Demarcus Robinson, people are talking about him as being like getting a big free agent contract. What has he done to deserve being a big? I don't understand that. And Sammy Watkins, I think if the Chiefs keep him this year, he's scheduled to count like $15 or $16 million on the cap. Like, there's no way he's in the Chiefs uniform next year, right? Unless he takes a massive pay cut. So like Mecole Hardman is going to be, or Kerry Hardman, we should call him. Mecole Hardman is going to be the number 2 receiver. He's going to get better and he's going to get more volume. I think this guy is going to be a wide receiver too. It means boom or bust, right? I mean, but Tyreek Hill's boom or bust, and I feel like half the wide receivers in fantasy football are boom or bust now. So I think this guy is legitimately going to be worth a 4th or 5th round pick that you could probably get in the double-digit rounds, maybe in some cases, depending on what happens in free agency. So yeah, you and I are on the same page. I love Hardman.
Yeah, glad to hear it. And I feel like I should have him higher after all the praise you heaped on him. I like him quite a bit. I feel like the only thing holding me back is like the slight possibility that Watkins could be back after taking a big pay cut. That could happen, but I think more likely than not, that Hardman is going to be the number 2, and then you're going to see Byron Pringle be the number 3 unless they draft someone. Maybe they spend a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick on a receiver, and then he's the number 3. So, yeah, I'm glad we're in agreement here. So I think a disagreement's coming soon from what you told me before we started recording. All right, so. I guess we know you're 5, 4, and 2. Who's your number 3?
My number 3 is another running back, Devin Singletary. And I was wrestling through Singletary, Hardman, and the guy that ended up my number 1. Like, those were the 3 guys. Singletary could have been my number 1 on this list. Those top 3 are really close for me. Singletary finished 31 in running backs in standard leagues, 29 in PPR. That's RB3 numbers already, right? I mean, so I think most people probably going into the draft will see him like as a RB2 going into the summer. I think most people, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm overrating or misreading the market. My first impression of Singletary was that he was like overall decent in everything with like no glaring holes in his game, but nothing spectacular either. That was my initial reaction of him early in the year 2019. And he had the fumbles early in the year. He fumbled 4 times in the first 8-9 games. And we know coaches do not like that. Or they're not fans of players. But the second half of the year, he got really good in a few areas. And in that Houston game, he played really well in that Houston playoff game, in that loss. He was really good in the screen game. He was really good in space after he caught the ball. And he was really good picking up blitz and pass blocking, which we know coaches love when players do that, which means he's going to be on the field more often, right? If you're really good at pass blocking, you're going to be on the field a lot. He's a little stronger than I realized. He's a little quicker than I realized at first. He's a slightly smaller version of Marshawn Lynch to me, just really balanced, really hard to bring down. I mean, Kareem Hunt has kind of that similar idea. This guy doesn't seem to be that good, but for some reason they can't get him down. And there's just sort of an innate. And Marshawn Lynch was that kind of guy, right? Remember the Bills traded him because they traded him for virtually nothing to the Seahawks because it was this guy's not going to be very good. And he ended up just outlasting guys. And I think Singletary is very, very similar. And so, yeah, I think this guy's going to really take a major step forward. People how much of a step forward? Does he have the talent to be a top 5 running back? I think the answer is yes. Heck, Derrick Henry, who I think has limited talent, was a top 3 running back this year. So, yeah, just always find ways to take shots at Derrick Henry. Yeah, I think Devin Singletary has like a legitimate chance to not just be an RB1, but to really put up like top 5 RB numbers in 2020.
I agree. I mean, I talked about how I expect Josh Allen to make a big jump, himself. Not fantasy wise, because he was already good fantasy wise, but like it just as a real life quarterback. And yeah, if he does, then I think that'll help Singletary a lot because the Bills will have more leads, and Singletary will run the ball more. I'm definitely a fan of Singletary. He was my number one fantasy sleeper last year for most of the summer. And so, I didn't put him on this list because I was playing him. I was starting him in fantasy leagues at the end of last year. But I think you make a good point where he can be a top 5 running back in fantasy. And so that would definitely qualify as a big leap. So I'm definitely on board with that. All right, my number 3 is another young receiver. It's Deontay Johnson from the Steelers. So Johnson played last year as a rookie. He did well at times, but we really didn't see what he could do because he was always paired with Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges. It was Roethlisberger started the first 2 games, but he wasn't himself. He was like always grabbing his arm in pain. So like it was clear that he wasn't 100%. So I'm curious to see how Johnson could play with a real quarterback. And it sounds like Roethlisberger should be healthy by the beginning of the year. Of course, we don't know like that. I mean, he could just retire like Andrew Luck, but I think more likely than not, Roethlisberger will be close to 100%, and that could mean good things for Johnson. Johnson's a very good route runner. He's elusive in space, and I think the ceiling is very high on this guy. So I'm a big fan of him. What do you think of him?
Yeah, he wasn't on my radar. But yeah, I don't remember taking like lots of extensive notes and watching him. But the things that stuck out to me was he was really, really good at bailing his quarterback. Duck Hodges, I don't know, when he was playing with a blindfold, it looked like. Deontay Johnson did a really good job of coming back to the ball frequently, kind of bailing his quarterback out, kind of breaking off the route properly. And those are the types of things that veteran receivers know how to do. That it takes a long time for younger players to learn how to do most of the time. Very few players are good at that immediately. And he seemed to have some of the veteran savvy, rounding skills, kind of understanding the situation of the game better than most younger players, which really bodes well. If you can figure that part of the game out quickly, I mean, everyone in the NFL is talented, right? For the most part, like everyone's got talent. It's those sort of nuances in the game that really separate guys from being, just good to being catapulted to being great. And so I think that really bodes well for his prospects going forward.
Yeah, nice that we both agree. So I feel like we're going to be chasing him as a fantasy sleeper in our draft come August. So all right, we know your number 2. It's Mecole Hardman. So I guess I'll go again. So my number 2. So I kind of cheated on number 1 and number 2. It's 2 players each, but they pair together though. Like you'll see what I'm talking about. And I think that I think this is going to be your disagreement. So my number 2 is Daniel Jones plus Darius Slayton. I'm a big fan of Daniel Jones. I know you're not because you root for the Eagles, but I do think that Daniel Jones is going to make a big leap forward in 2020. He had some very bright moments as a rookie. That first game against Tampa, and then Saquon Barkley went down, and then Jones struggled for a while. Barkley came back. Jones still struggled from time to time, especially against better defenses. But Barkley was never 100%. And then when Barkley got healthy at the end of the year, that's when Daniel Jones started playing very well again. And he was a rookie, and now he has a whole offseason to get better, to get familiar with his guys. He has good weapons at his disposal. Evan Ingram, we mentioned him before. He's Sterling Shepard, Saquon Barkley, of course, and then Darius Slayton. I'll get to him in a little bit. But then you have the offensive line, which should improve. They had the number 4 pick in the draft. There are a ton of good tackles in the draft, so they're going to get the best one. So if they improve Jones's protection, I think he's going to have a big year. And then you have Darius Slayton, who is just a monster down the stretch. I think he's a pretty talented receiver, and it's not like they have a number 1. I didn't mention Golden Tate before, but they have Tate, Shepard, and Ingram to throw to downfield. None of those guys are like a number 1. They're all like number 2 caliber players. Like Ingram's tight end, obviously, but I think Slayton has upward mobility to become Daniel Jones's favorite receiver, and they definitely showed a good rapport late in the year. So I like these 2 together. So I take it you disagree with this.
Slayton's fine. He's a nice route runner as well. I think he seems to have limited talent, but I think if the system is right, yeah, he'll be fine. Now, okay, yeah, I knew you're going to have Daniel Jones on your list. I had a feeling. So, and I was listening to you and Jacob yesterday. By the way, if anyone was listening to this, if you're not listening to Jacob and Walt, they have great analysis, and you usually get at least one comment from me. So, so make sure you get a. Okay, I know you guys were just praising him again. I'm like, am I missing something? So then I went back and just kind of watched. I pulled up Game Pass. You know, he didn't throw a ton of passes. So you can watch them all relatively quickly. You know, I don't think it took me 30 minutes to watch every pass he made in 2019. It feels like. There are definitely moments where he looks really good. He makes some spectacular throws. But there are two major things that I see that makes me concerned with Daniel Jones in general. Well, as an Eagles fan, is exciting. Number one, he doesn't seem to always feel the pressure. Like, and I know sometimes that's rookie status type stuff, but there's a lot of guys that innately know that. Like Kyler Murray was really good at it. There's a couple other guys that are just really good at it. That makes me a little bit nervous. Now, being an Eagles fan, I watch Carson Wentz, who also struggles with this. The difference is Carson Wentz has like some amazing athleticism and like this incredible like vintage duck move, right? That Daniel Jones clearly does not have that type of elusiveness, though Wentz does. I wish Wentz would get better at this as well, but you kind of just take the good with the bad, I guess. What you're rooting for? There's some other things. There are a couple times Daniel Jones did not see the field well. There are a couple games where he made some really bad passes, and he got away with some should have been interceptions. And so I also then looked at some Pro Football Focus ratings for him. Pro Football Focus said he was the 24th best starting quarterback in 2019. Okay, that's not terrible for a rookie. But then you look at if you look at every rookie to start at least 4 games in the last decade. When you compare their PFF grades and advanced analytics, his 2 best comps are Sam Bradford and Mike Glennon. Ugh, that's not good. Like statistically, that's the camp he's in. Does he have more talent than those guys? Certainly, definitely. But I guess to me, I'm looking at his grades and like his comps, and I'm looking at some of his mistakes, and I guess I remain unconvinced. But there are definitely moments where he's like, "Ooh, that was a really great throw," and so to me, I guess I won't be drafting him. But there's enough good there that doesn't shock me if you and other guys begin to really believe in him.
The Mike Glennon comparison, I think, is crazy. I mean, I love PFF. It's a great website, but I don't agree with Glennon. That's insane. Bradford, I could see that, but then again, Bradford had a very good rookie year. Like, remember before all the injuries, he was actually a pretty good player.
Yeah.
And then he just suffered so many injuries, and he just became a shell of his former self. But neither of those guys, Glennon or Bradford, had as much scrambling ability as Jones has. Like, Jones is a pretty good runner too. So I think that's something that's kind of like a feather in his cap. So, if passing wise, if you're going to say he's the 24th best quarterback as a rookie, I think that's fine because, he wasn't protected very well, and he was missing Saquon Barkley for some games, and then Barkley wasn't healthy. So there were things going against him. Plus, Pat Shurmur was not a very good coach. So I think they should have a better coaching staff now. So I think Jones would take a big leap in his second year. As far as not seeing the field very well, I think that ties into being a rookie. And you made a good point. I mean, Kyler Murray saw the field better than Daniel Jones did. But I think something that I mentioned before kind of ties into that, where the Giants have the number 4 pick in the draft. They're going to get the best tackle. Their offensive line is going to be a lot better next year, like no matter what. So that, if Jones doesn't feel the pressure that well, he could be I think he's going to be better than Jared Goff, but it's kind of like a Jared Goff situation where, remember in 2017 or Jared Goff, or it was 2018, Jared Goff's protection was great, and he was able to get to the Super Bowl. And then the next year, the Rams offensive line got a lot worse, and we kind of saw what Jared Goff was all about. I think Jones will be better than Goff, like I said, but it could sort of be that situation where if Jones's offensive line improves, that could really kind of cover up some of the issues that you mentioned. I think another thing another problem that Jones has is ball security. He tends to fumble the ball a lot. But I think that's something you can fix. I mean, so I expect Jones to make a big leap in his second year.
Nice. All right. Well, I remain unconvinced. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. As I expected the Eagles fan in you to be unconvinced.
And your dog in the background seems unconvinced, barking away there.
I'm surprised you can hear that because I have the microphone, I have the door closed, and he's downstairs.
He's very passionate. He doesn't like Dan Jones either. I can tell.
Well, I guess I'm outnumbered 2-1, but I'm pretty confident in my projection. All right. So who's your number one? Well, first of all, I mentioned I have a pairing as well, so I kind of cheated. But I'm curious to hear who your number one guy is.
My number one guy, I've talked about him before, so I don't think anyone who's listening to the pod will be completely shocked. And I also did, I think you did more of like guys that are a little more lower that were going to make a larger leap. I don't think I took that a little bit of a different route. This guy finished as the 18th best wide receiver last year in fantasy, in standard ESPN leagues. That's Mr. Courtland Sutton. I am a huge fan. In fact, a few months ago, maybe back in October, November, I said on the podcast that I am convinced there's going to come a time in the next few years where Courtland Sutton's the best wide receiver in the NFL. And I'm still convinced of that, kind of watching some of his game. This guy runs every route. He's got great hands. He's very athletic. He makes, there were multiple times this year where it looked like the DB had an interception and he just he magicianed his way in midair to just take the ball away from the receiver. He seems to be a really smart player. He's like, he can box out like he's Shaq. It's weird. Is it did he play maybe he played basketball when he was young and I think he has potential to be a red zone monster. And he's not super fast, but he's also not slow. I think people talk about him like he's super slow. I think that's a little bit weird. People talk about him like he's this molasses runner. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. He's great with the contested ball. Alshon Jeffrey, Des Bryant, Brandon Marshall, even Allen Robinson. None of those guys are blazing fast, but they're really good route runners and they're really good going up and just getting the ball. They're great at that. I think Sutton is a little bit faster, if not a lot faster than all of those guys. And he's certainly as athletic, if not more, than any of those guys. So to me, I have zero question mark about this guy being as productive, if not better than those guys at some point in their career. At no point in Alshon Jeffrey, Des Bryant, Allen Robinson, or Brandon Marshall's career were they the best receiver in football. I think Courtland Sutton has more potential than those guys have. I can't guarantee it, obviously, but and so the only the only question mark is the offense and the quarterback. Is the offense going to be better? Is the quarterback going to be better? Because I think that could definitely stunt his ability to be a monster red zone guy if the team's not getting in the red zone a lot, if they got a terrible quarterback or a terrible offensive system. But we've seen really good receivers still produce with bad teams and bad quarterbacks, right? Larry Fitzgerald's been doing it for 3 decades, it seems like. Right? Devontae Parker, and we've seen Mike Evans. We've seen guys in recent history produce even with bad systems. And so Courtland Sutton, in my mind, is that kind of guy. So, if he finished 18th last year, I got to predict a major leap, right? I'm going to predict in 2020, Courtland Sutton's a top 3 wide receiver. I think he finishes in the top 3. And I think in 2021, he's a first round pick in a lot of fantasy drafts.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to discussing the top players at each position with you, just to see where Courtland Sutton fits in. I'm a big Sutton fan too. The reason I didn't include him on my list is because kind of like what you mentioned, where you took the guys who were in the mid tier and will jump up to the top tier. Where I took guys who were in the lower tier, and I think they're going to be in the mid tier, maybe even a little bit higher. I feel like I could see Hardman or Johnson kind of approaching the higher tier. So yeah, I think it's just a different approach that we took, but I love Sutton as well. So he's definitely someone I'm going to target in my draft, and I feel like I'm not going to get him in our league because I don't think he'll be top 3 receiver, but I think he'll definitely be in the top 10. And maybe he'll be the 5, 6, 7 guy or something. So I can definitely see that. So what do you think about Andrew's comparison to Des Bryant?
He says Sutton reminds me of Dez. I think he's better than Dez. I think he's faster. His long speed is good. Dez could go up and get the ball always as good as any, right? He had the attitude, but Des Bryant was also never a guy who got great separation. And so I think Sutton is Dez, but slightly faster.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So my number one is a pair of receivers, but they're from the same team, so I think I can be allowed to do this.
Nice.
Plus, it is my podcast, so I make all the rules here. All right, my number ones are Debo Samuel and Jalen Hurd. Late in the year, I really like what we saw Samuel.
Yeah.
He became Garoppolo's number one receiver. Remember, they got Emmanuel Sanders in the middle of the year, and like at first Sanders was Garoppolo's number one wide receiver, and then in the playoffs it became Debo Samuel, and yeah, not only as a receiver, he became a running threat out of the backfield too. So like he's kind of like a multi-dimensional threat. I think in his second year, and he was only a rookie, so in his second year, I think he's going to make a big leap forward. Jalen Hurd is someone who missed all of his rookie year, but he was actually outplaying Debo Samuel in the preseason. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot, but I really like what I saw out of Jalen Hurd. I liked him coming out of college, and I don't think Emmanuel Sanders would be back. It sounds like he won't return, and so the top two receivers on the 49ers, unless they sign someone or draft someone, they'll be Debo Samuel and Jalen Hurd, and I think those two guys both together could make a big jump in 2020. What do you think?
I like that a lot. Debo Samuel looked really good. I guess to me, my concern is, there's a couple there's those guys are good, and they're especially good in Shanahan's system. There seems to be some cap on their talent, but even in addition to that, there seems to be a cap on the system. I don't know what to expect from that system. Are they just going to spread the ball around so evenly that it's hard to expect who's going to make that jump? And neither one of those guys are ever going to be the number one option in the passing game. That's going to be Kittle. So to me, I'm always a little bit nervous. Like, do you have a legitimate chance to be the primary passing option? Maybe Debo Samuel has that down the road, but in 2020, I think it's still George Kittle. So that's the only cap I see, although I don't think you're crazy at all. Side note, I think related to that, what do we make of Dante Pettis at this point? Like that's a guy who in 2018 we thought had all kinds of talent, and we thought he was going to be the guy. So do we know? Does that make you nervous? Does that play a part in your thinking, or do you think Pettis is he kind of off your radar? You think it's going to be Hurd and Samuel?
I think it'll depend on what we see from him in the preseason. He was in Shanahan's doghouse. It seems like Shanahan just doesn't like him. So right now, yeah, it is weird. Yeah, right now I would say it's Debo and then Jalen Hurd. I think they're the top two receivers. That could change. That could totally change. And I think I agree with what you're saying about them having cap. Like there are going to be some weeks where Jalen Hurd just gets one catch for 12 yards and that's it.
Right.
You know, like that happens in the 49ers offense because they're so run heavy. The thing is, though, the Niners had some very good injury luck last year. I know that they were missing their center for some games. George Kittle missed a couple of games here and there, and then Quan Alexander missed some games. But like overall, they were a healthy team. I think next year, if they have worse luck with injuries, it'll create a situation where they have fewer leads. And if they have fewer leads, they're going to have to throw more. And I think that'll bode well for Samuel and then Hurd to a lesser extent.
Yeah, definitely possible. My bigger concern is if Dante Pettis, who I still believe has a lot of talent, comes back, does that muddy things? And then in the red zone, George Kittle's the man, right? We love George Kittle. I mean, I love, you were on George Kittle before I was. Actually, you were an earlier adopter. So Kittle makes me a little nervous that Kittle becomes the red zone guy. So that feels like the caps the touchdown opportunities there a little.
Yeah, Andrew says Jimmy G also likes Kendrick Bourne. I mean Kendrick Bourne is going to be around. He's not nearly as talented as Hurd or Samuel. So right. I think Bourne is going to be their number 3 receiver next year.
Samuel was really good in the playoffs too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like Bourne is pretty limited in what he can do. He's gonna be the number 3 guy, unless like Pettis is the wild card for sure. But I mean, the way he entered the doghouse and never left, like that kind of concerns me. We have one recommendation, actually 2. We'll get to the second one in a bit. Parrot on YouTube asks, "What about John Ross? He's gonna break out if he didn't get injured. Now that Green is gone, presumably, and they get Burrow. Seems too perfect. What do you think about John Ross?"
I don't know that I agree that he was definitely going to break out if he got injured. He had some big games, but I don't know. Like, yeah, he had a couple of nice. I've tried a tough time believing in John Ross until I see it. The guy's just not only has been injury prone, he's been terribly inconsistent. there's just something off there. It'd be hard for me to trust him.
I agree. I mean, he seems like the kind of like the Dante Stallworth / Ted Ginn guy who have like there'll be like 3 or 4 weeks in the year where he has like a monster game and then he does nothing the rest of the year. So it's not like someone you want to trust in year-long fantasy.
Hey, by the way, Ted Ginn has been in the. I was listening to talk radio here in Minnesota, and someone mentioned him. He's been in the league like 15 seasons. Like he's actually had he's made a decent career of himself after being the 9th overall pick. Whatever that was, 2006, I guess it was. He was the 9th overall pick by the Dolphins, which was definitely an overreach, and he was a bust early in his career. But like he's made like a decent career for himself. Like, well done on you, Mr. Ginn.
Yeah, I mean, he was overdrafted. He was taken in the first round, and I criticized the pick at the time. I didn't think he was worth the first round pick, and I stand by that. But if he was taken in the second round, that would have been fine. And then, yeah, absolutely, he's been in the league forever. We had a suggestion earlier: if the Cardinals cut David Johnson, what do you think about Kenyon Drake?
He was great. He was great for a couple games last year. We've seen him be great with the Dolphins. I love Kenyon Drake's. I love his talent. A couple years ago, he was like my number one sleeper player. But once I've seen a player be inconsistent, it's always hard for me to trust him again because they could always fall apart. Like, and I know maybe that was Adam Gase. Maybe it's a new change of scenery. So I find out hard. Secondly, the Cardinals would be on the hook for a lot of money if they cut David Johnson. I think it's highly unlikely they cut David Johnson, who, by the way, when he's been healthy, has still been good. So I don't know. I have a tough time believing they're going to cut him.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I mean, if that does happen, I think Drake is going to have a big year. I actually like Drake regardless. I mean, he's pretty talented and he just seems like a good fit in the system. And David Johnson, yeah, I mean, he's good when he's healthy, but when does that happen? Like he's never healthy. So I definitely agree. Go ahead.
Ted Ginn was not the number one receiver on the Panthers Super Bowl team. This is what Andrew Zoe here says. The number one receiver was Mr. Kelvin Benjamin. Right? No, I'm wrong. Kelvin Benjamin got
injured that year.
Yeah, he was. I'm an idiot. You're right, Andrew. Sorry.
Well, I guess you could say that that Greg Olsen was technically the number one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. Come on, Andrew. Get your stuff. Get your facts right, Andrew.
Yeah. All right. Here we have some suggestions from Birdman Eagles, 52 champs, Reed, 54 champs, breakout candidates. Josh Allen, we talked about him. I like Allen more in real life than fantasy breakout because, I mean, he was already good in fantasy. 2, Drew Lock. I could see that. Colton Miller, that's, not fantasy. Zaire Franklin and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson could do well. Any thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's all limited. There's limited. I mean, I hope Drew Lock is great because it'll help my boy Cortland Sutton. But Drew Lock has some major inadequacies and deficiencies that make me of that group. Josh Allen's the one that I think is the one that takes the biggest step forward of that group there. But how much does that translate to fantasy numbers? I don't know.
Yeah. All right, top 5 defenses that make a jump in fantasy. Don't draft a defense. Don't even worry about that. Play matchups every week. I don't even, and don't draft the number 1 defense from last year. I guess that'll be the Ravens, it'll be the Niners. It'll like people are going to draft the Niners in the 8th round. Don't do it. Last year, people drafted the Rams in the 8th round. They busted. The year before, people drafted the Jaguars in the 8th round. They busted. Every year, it's a new top defense. And I think generally, I don't have data, but I remember, I think you said it. It's a very low percentage that the top defense is even in the top 10 in the following year, just because things can change so easily. So just take a defense in the last round, or don't even draft a defense and just wait till the day before to pick one up.
Yeah, I think I got the stat from it's from Fantasy Pros. They ran articles and some stats basically saying there had been 8 consecutive seasons that the top fantasy defense wasn't even in the top 10 the next season. So yeah, it's significant that you should not do that. You and I know you and I have the same strategy for fantasy defenses. Is we just look at the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, see who's playing, what the matchups are, and basically go by that.
Yeah, and we're always fighting over that defense too. So yeah, that's a strategy everyone should utilize. If your draft is not like a couple days before the season starts, don't even draft the defense. Take another sleeper, just so you give yourself a better chance of getting a late round sleeper because injuries could happen, guys can get cut, and then you have a better chance to get a good breakout guy, and then you can just find a defense anywhere. That I don't even know if the Niners were popularly drafted last year.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so I mean, these defenses coming out of nowhere. And if you're looking for a sleeper defense, I don't think we even know yet because free agency in the draft. Like I feel like Andrew, we can answer your question after the draft, and then I'll have a better idea of which defense I'll like. Here we go. Another question, Miles Sanders question mark. That's your account. What do you think?
I love Miles Sanders. Obviously, I think he's already made a significant jump. I mean, I think I don't know that Miles Sanders has the system or the ability to be a top 5 to make that jump. Like him and Devin Singletary and Josh Jacobs, they're the best 3 running backs from this past rookie draft. I actually think Singletary and Sanders are both better than Josh Jacobs, even though Jacobs got a lot more rookie of the year consideration. He was the first round pick. But I would say Singletary and Sanders are pretty close in my mind. Maybe I give a slight edge to Sanders because he's a little more dynamic, but Singletary's a little bit of a more power guy. But they're both really good. Jacobs is a close third in my opinion. But of those guys, the guy who has the most likely ability to kind of jump into the top 5, top 3, I think is Devin Singletary, based on the situation he's in. I expect the Eagles to be far more pass heavy than the Bills. I fully expect the Eagles to address the wide receiver position and be much more spread the ball around. I think Doug Peterson wants to spread the ball around much more than what the Bills want to do. So love Sanders. I think Sanders could certainly be a top 5 running back in fantasy. I think Devin Singletary has a more likelihood of doing that in 2020.
If both guys stay healthy all 16 games next year, who gets more touches?
It's a good question. Man, I think it's really close. I think Singletary might get would be a little more, just because I think the Eagles want to run the ball, want to spread the ball around a little more than I think the Bills do.
I agree, and that goes to the comment that Birdman says about Staley's game plans. The Eagles like to mix it up with the running backs. Like, remember last year, even when Sanders was hot, they started Boston Scott. Like, Boston Scott got the first carry, and it's like I remember playing Miles Sanders in DraftKings, and I'd be like so tilted. I'm like, why is Boston Scott getting carries? But a guy we can add to the list if Miles Sanders goes down with an injury, Boston Scott is going to be a top guy who emerges.
God forbid he goes down with an injury. Let's not have that happen.
Well, we know the Eagles injury history is pretty well. Andrew asks, will you do a top 5 drop offs? I'm down for that.
Yeah,
if you are. Yeah, that'd be cool. What running back in the draft this year will lead the class in fantasy points? I guess my guess right now is Swift, but it really depends where these guys go. We can answer that after the draft too.
Yeah, so much of that the situation, and even it's so hard to know because it varies so much. I mean, we may not know until deep into the preseason.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we don't know yet. But in May, we can answer that question. And then we had one more comment. Here we go. Love the jump from John Peterson. Love the podcast. Any TV based episodes in the future. I've been binge watching Chuck. If y'all haven't seen it, love Chuck. Chuck is an amazing show. I miss it. Gallup is my choice, by the way. Yeah, we talked about Gallup. We both like him, but he's already productive last year. Yeah. I'm down to do TV episodes in the summer, like when there's no draft coming up, or
let's do it.
Yeah, like in May or June. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
I've got the idea to let's do the best mini series we've ever watched, because I just watched Chernobyl on HBO. It was phenomenal.
Okay, I haven't seen that, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah, but have you seen Chuck?
No, I never even heard of it.
Oh, it's with Zach Levi, I think that's his name, and then I forget who else was in it, but it was an amazing show. It was both funny and had a good plot, and I loved it. It's one of the shows I missed. What are you guys' predictions for Preston Williams in fantasy points? I like Williams. I mean, he definitely could have made the list. We'll see what the Dolphins do at quarterback. But But yeah, I mean, Williams was someone who was very productive last year, and then he got injured. And then, but you know, you have Devontae Parker is going to be the number one. I assume he's going to be the number two. What do you think about Preston Williams?
Yeah, I liked him a lot actually as a young, potential up and coming player last year. Anytime a young player gets injured though, you never know how it stunts their growth and development. So that makes you a little bit nervous, and how much is that impacting their offseason rehab versus just preparing to get better? So I think that's part of it. And I expect the Dolphins to draft and add some players. So if you add Mike Gesicki and Parker and maybe someone they draft, like Williams might get buried on the depth chart a little bit in terms of passing options. So I like him as a player, but I wouldn't go out of my way to force him on a squad.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long offseason, so we'll see what happens. If they draft a receiver, obviously, like you said, he's gonna be buried. If they don't draft a receiver, then I think he can be productive. Birdman asks, besides McCaffrey, who do you like for early picks? For me, obviously Saquon Barkley is at the top. You have Michael Thomas at receiver. Quarterbacks, I wouldn't even touch early. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, obviously you're going to be targeting Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. I like Mahomes a little bit more than Jackson at this point, but based on how I draft, I will never get Mahomes or Jackson because people take quarterbacks way too early, and there's just more value at running back and receiver.
Yeah, and to me, even McCaffrey is a guy that I fully expect to take a step back, statistically wise. Just because there's just no way they can use him that way again, and expect him to stay healthy. It's just not, it's just crazy. And that team was so bad, it just became just dump off to McCaffrey crazy, right? He was getting 10, he was getting 12 targets, easily a game, just because they were just dumping the ball off to him. They had slop at quarterback, So it's just, if that team is healthy, I fully expect McCaffrey to be very productive, but actually have worse stats, which ultimately would be better for the Panthers. But Barkley's gonna be the top of my list in every format. If you have a chance to draft Saquon Barkley, you don't do it. I think you're a fool. The guy's just too good.
I was just about to ask you about that. Who you have higher between McCaffrey and Barkley? I initially listed McCaffrey as my number one running back, but then the more I thought about it, and I was also on another show where we discussed this topic as well. I think in my next update, Barkley is going to be the number one running back. And something else to add to McCaffrey, you're going to have Cam Newton back as well, and Cam Newton's going to take some rushing touchdowns away from McCaffrey. So that's definitely another factor. Andrew asked about DK Metcalf. I mean, he's a guy who could have made the list as well, but he was so productive late in the year that I just didn't have him there.
Yeah, I think DK Metcalf could be really good, could get better. It's hard to see him make a big jump because he was really good late in the year. There are several guys, and I thought about that I think are going to be better, but I'm just not sure. Miles Sanders is actually on that list in my mind, guys that I think will be better in the next year, but I don't know that really translates to being great. I mentioned Kyler Murray, obviously. DJ Chark and DJ Moore, obviously, in that camp for me as well.
Yeah. All right. Last one. What running back, receivers, quarterbacks do you recommend if I want to do a PPR league? I feel like we could do that later. Michael Thomas obviously is going to catch a ton of passes. Barkley and McCaffrey, even though we think McCaffrey will be worse statistically next year. He's obviously near the top. And then if you're in you shouldn't take a quarterback early in a PPR league, let alone standard. You should wait on quarterbacks. But yeah, you should definitely wait on PPR.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Parrot says DJ Moore is going to be insane if Cam is healthy. I love Moore. But again, the problem is that Cam Newton is going to run in a lot of touchdowns, whereas, Kyle Allen didn't do that last year. So while Moore could be better, in real life, statistically, he might be a little bit worse. That is my concern with DJ Moore a little bit.
Yeah, and to me, I'm always asking myself the question. I did that when I'm looking at my list. Does this guy have the potential to be the number one red zone threat on his team? So when I'm looking at a list, my 5 guys are the guys that I think are in that. I don't think DJ Moore likely is ever the number one red zone option on that team. I think that's Christian McCaffrey, or I think it's Cam Newton. Or I just think they just spread it out and they just try to exploit the defense. So where I think there are other teams where I think the Broncos are going to be in the red zone and say, we're going to force the ball to Sutton because we know that if he's triple covered, he still has a chance to score a touchdown. Those are the types of guys. Moore is not that kind of guy. So it's hard for me to put a lot of, stock in Moore, even though I love him as a player.
It's a great point. Yeah. He's he's number 3 at highest right now in the red zone, right? And then you have Ian Thomas, who's going to take over for Greg Olsen. Maybe Cam loves throwing to Ian Thomas in the red zone too. So that's definitely a concern. Yeah, as Andrew just mentioned, Ian Thomas. Yeah, I think DJ Moore could end up being the number 4 target in the red zone. So it's a great point. And then lastly, when is Emmitt Smith going to write for you guys and share his mock draft? I actually started on the Emmitt mock draft. It's not finished yet, but it will be finished by April. So there will be some interesting picks. I promise.
I can't wait. Emmitt on the brink. Emmitt's making a comeback. I love it. I love that story.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it too. I love that he's doing the Dallas Cowboys preseason broadcast as an announcer, and he had some gems. Like he said, like the Cowboys got to get back to square zero. It's like
that's so great.
It was amazing. I miss him being on TV every week. But I guess that's it. Unless you have anything else. If not, do you have anything to plug?
No, man. I'm just I'm trying to jump up a level my own way. So trying to figure out ways to do that in my own personal life. So I encourage everyone else to do the same. Look at me being Oprah Winfrey inspirational today.
I look forward to referring to you as president instead of vice president going forward.
I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah. So I'm at waltzerfootball.com. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, or if you are, just share this if you like our content. Word of mouth is how we get more readers. So that'd be greatly appreciated. But yeah, I'm at waltzerfootball.com. Lots of combine updates. Charlie is at the combine, not technically in the building because we are banned from the combine, but he is in Indianapolis and providing some great reports. If you go to the homepage right now, you'll see some of those reports. Actually, he sent me an article like a minute before we started recording. I didn't read it yet, but it was what the Redskins want for Trent Williams in a trade. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing what Charlie has to write about that, and then I'm going to post it tonight or tomorrow morning. So definitely check that out. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week.
You the man, Walt.
All right, bye.